So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another special episode of The Ways We Move. I am your host, Nicolas Zart, and today we're not going to have anybody come on the show at all. We are at the Air Service World in Atlanta right now, and we're talking to those people making these routes, the logistics behind the strategy for your flights, for your everyday flights, the reality. And it's a really interesting time to have these conversations with these folks because for the most part, when it comes to air service, it's not something that they are yet taking into consideration. And rightfully so. AAM, we're still writing the books, we're still writing the chapters as we unfold them, or as I like to say, we're peeling the onion layer one by one. But here's what I've learned so far is there is a need to talk about it right now. A lot of these people here are airport people, and a lot of them are also airline people. So we've had some interesting discussions with airline folks about what they need to understand and what needs to happen before advanced air mobility becomes a reality. One of the things that we found out is that so far, when it comes to airports, there's really a 50% split between, well, it's hype, it's not going to happen. AAM is just a hype, which is interesting. So these people, we don't really want to talk to them. That's not important. However, the other 50% says, yes, it's interesting. We don't really understand it. We don't know if it will happen or not. These people, we like to talk to them because we can help them better understand, prepare, plan, and eventually implement innovative aerial mobility solutions. One of the things that I was very impressed with is also the amount of consulting groups that help our uh, aerial travels happen in a better way. These guys were very interested, not necessarily working in the industry, but interested in understanding more, therefore, to prepare for it. Another interesting thing, too, and this is a myth that we often hear, is how AAM is going to start in big airports. I'm thinking about Los Angeles, Atlanta, New York. Well, this is something that we don't really think is the reality of things. I think quite the opposite. AAM will start in smaller regional airports, in smaller, more urban places where, guess what, the demand is. So this leads me to also point out a really interesting facts, and we saw it when we interviewed Yvonne at Fly Now, is we're starting to see a second generation of eVTOL makers or even eSTOL and eCTOL makers who are consider themselves to be demand driven, unlike the others that are technology driven. And this is a really interesting thing because it's kind of the point of what we're doing is to help humans move in a more efficient, safer way, or in other words, to add another different type of transportation, especially when it comes to those last few miles, from your front door to a business center, downtown, tourist destination, and of course, airports. So this is really interesting. We're starting to see that happening. It's very important. Another myth that we're debunking here very often is, wow, have you seen what the big four are doing? They're going to be flying from LAX, they're going to be flying from New York, they're going to be no, because we don't hear airports saying that. So when I only hear Joby, Archer, and I love Joby and Archer, don't get me wrong, right? That what they're doing is absolutely amazing. We'll back them up 100%. But when I hear that, they will be flying in pairs, flying all around the world, I don't hear the airport saying the same thing. In fact, when I look at what it says, it doesn't say anything about building a vertiport. And so now the conversation is shifting to, well, the other regional airports will have these vertiports. Okay, maybe, but if you want to land in the heart of LA, especially at the stadium, you're going through LAX air traffic. And so that's really complicated in and of itself. So again, the point is not to diss big airports or to diss Archer and Joby. We love what they're doing, but it's also a reminder that you have to be really careful when you read press releases. I used to write press releases, and I know what goes on behind the scenes. Press releases are not meant to educate, even to inform. They're meant for investors. They are calling for investors. That's all they are. So don't only read press releases and think you understand what the industry is about. Not at all. The real thing, the real gist is really at the infrastructure level, because at the infrastructure level, we're the ones who are going to make sure that you can get on these aircraft and fly safely from one point to another. So it's really more along that. And even at the infrastructure level, there are some very big, prominent infrastructure, AAM infrastructure companies that are also, very, how should we say, very heavy on the press release mode of communication. And again, that's not where you're going to learn the most. And in fact, most of the places where you're going to learn the most about anything is, air current, all these kind of places, or of course, this podcast, obviously, because I'm pretty much I have been in this industry for so long. We actually know how to read through things. But anyway, I'm sort of joking here. And the reason why I'm saying this very last part about airports is because a colleague friend of ours asked the Atlanta airport, ATL, what are you doing when it comes to the future of aviation, hence AAM, advanced air mobility? And the answer was very interesting. They said, we're interested, we're looking at it, we're studying it, but we don't want to spend money on something that may or may not work the way we think it will. So of course, it was a very diplomatic answer, and we, they told us that that was a diplomatic answer, but it is again a question of priorities. These big airports are not, let's just say that their priorities is not advanced air mobility. However, regional airports and smaller airports, that is a priority because they're underused, underserved, and they have a lot of space, and they also have a lot of untapped routes. Adventure mobility helps them get closer to city centers, closer to business centers, and of course, tourist destination. Now add on top of it EMS, organ transportation, things like that, and you can see how it makes a lot more sense in an urban environment to think about where do we start AEM. So this is what we're learning here, especially at the air service world. I will have a panel in about an hour, in about 2 hours from now, where we are going to talk about the reality of advanced air mobility, especially for these airports who are here and these airlines that are here. What does it mean? What does it look like? What will it be? And we're moving away more and more away from eVTOL and vertiports only to a more integrative approach, hence what we call multi-ports, and including not only eVTOLs, but eSTOLs, eCTOLs, and of course, airplanes and helicopters. We want to include everything. In fact, not just that, but electric vehicles, charging stations, autonomous vehicles, and why not? Electric boats, railroad. All of these things have to be included in what we do. And so keep your eyes out on something that happened not too long ago. You might have seen SkyDrive, the Japanese eVTOL maker, has been striking relationships with the Japanese railroad companies. That's huge because that's something we're also working on is how do we get people to go from a train station to the airport to other places. And if you know, in the US, airports have been fighting tooth and nail metro line extensions to their airports because well, airports make a lot of money on parking fees. That's where they get most of their money from, in fact, strangely enough, right? And having thought that, they're also coming to the point, the realization point that, well, less and less people are driving. Certainly no one wants to pay $40 a day to keep a car in a parking lot in an airport. And no matter how far away you push Uber and Lyft, people still use it because it's convenient. So there's a lot of reckoning, there's a lot of realization that things are changing and things will continue to change. So overall, people understand that advanced air mobility will happen. They don't necessarily know how, and neither do we. We're still writing the book, but this is what we're walking away from here today. I hope you've enjoyed this very brief and impromptu episode of The Ways We Move. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. That's important. Tell people about what we're doing here. We're providing some good educational pieces. My good friend Marilyn Smith, Professor Smith, who we've had on the podcast, is going to be here in a few hours. In fact, on my panel, as well as another colleague of mine, Bob Johnson, whom I've known for a few years now. and also Ahmad Malik, who is an AI expert and works at Eurocontrol, which we'll have him also on the show at one point or another. But yes, please do write your comments, do like, do subscribe, and tell us what you think. What is your understanding of AAM? How will, or maybe not, how will it change your life? What would be ideal for you? Is it cool to think that a little one-seater will just plop in front of your front door and whisk you to an airport, a business center, downtown, a tourist place, or you get somewhere with your car or step out of a train, you hop on one of those things and it gets you to your hotel. Do those things mean anything to you? Do you like hearing those things? What does it look like in your mind? We're always interested to hear about that. In the meantime, stay tuned because next we have yet another very interesting person who will be on The Ways We Move. And we hope you've enjoyed Raphaël Donjon's last appearance on The Ways We Move. That guy is terrific and we love him. So thank you. Stay tuned and we'll see you next week.